Hello, and welcome to the Souls and Simulation podcast. We are your hosts, Devin and Angie, and this podcast provides an alternate view on life after death, processing everything that's wrong, and possible solutions on how to get it right in the afterlife.
Hello, everybody, and happy almost Halloween, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. Yeah, happy Halloween. And so today's episode, we're actually going to be going over the history and the origins of Halloween or Hallows Eve or um, I think it was called something else. I have it in my notes for later. Um, yeah.
Exactly. And some people, there's also the old Celtic, a lot of people mispronounce it as Samhain. That is not correct. It's actually Samhain. But that is the initial holiday that we now know as Halloween. And we're going to get into all of that and also discuss the ways in which that traps um, it is a consistent trap in many respects, and how this is thousands of years later, it's still being celebrated, and all of the representations and what we're paying respect to. And it's going to get dark. And trigger warning right now: if you're ever been Catholic and you hold that in some revere, or even the Protestant religions who have kind of, I mean, there's Christian churches today that have Halloween celebrations. Um, yeah, it's going to get dumped on. And your countries that celebrate it, the industries that support it, even the idea of candy and receiving candy and taking your kids trick or treating and dressing them up. Trigger warning: it's not going to be pleasant. So you've been warned. Listen with that in mind.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into it. So, Samhain was created about 2,000 years ago, right? And it started in Ireland, and the Celtics they started with the holiday, and it was more so a ritual and a festival. And for them, it was a day when the veil between the living and the dead became really, really thin. And it's also a day when they believed that with the thinness of the veiling, the Celtic druids could foresee the future. But it marked the end of the harvest, the beginning of the winter, and they would get really big bonfires, which would symbolize protection from the ghosts, the entities, the wandering spirits, the leprechauns, the fairies, right? All of those different types of beings that we can't see. Um, and yeah, so uh, also part of their tradition, they would wear masks and disguises to confuse wandering ghosts. But Angie's going to get more into all of the details about it, having done lots of research in it, or, reading and everything.
Yeah, I've studied it for years just based on, at first it was like ancestral pride, having been Irish.
Yeah.
And if you trace the Irish people back, they're actually initially Scottish, going way, way back. And then you had clans from the Scottish that separated and moved into Ireland. Then they become the Irish people, or actually they become the Picts, which then become the Celts. So we're going back to Pict culture, which even goes back to the history which is correct. It's the written history from basically Roman accounts. But as you'll find out, much like every civilization that we have on the planet, we only know the history of the world based upon the victors. We never write. We don't know we know some of the Native American history here in the States, but we only know a fraction of it. And the people who are of those cultures don't even know about their own culture. Ask the average Black person today, do they know what tribe they came from in Africa? No, because they were assimilated. Ask a Mexican person how many Mexican people actually know that they're part either Portugal or Spain, Spanish, and Native American. They have Native because that's how the Mexican line comes into existence. So what we're going to find out today is that most of what we've been told about, we don't even know all of it, especially about Pict history, let alone the Celtic, because it's been rewritten from many accounts. And you just let me know where you want me to start, and I'll pick it up from there.
Sure. Yeah. Um,
You want me to start with the Druids
I think
and the ancient Druids?
yeah.
It's real. I mean, it's pretty simple. They basically they were the priest of the society. Um, a lot of people have romanticized them as, and in terms of their culture and their way of life, it was very communal. It was very supportive. But they were still in a prison mindset, being that they feared these beings, um, that was like an alien race. And the whole bonfire that you talked about, yes, it was it was an effigy to them. And they were not performing human sacrifices. That is something that later on the Romans actually write about to make them appear like we do with everybody. Oh, the Native Americans, right? We were told all of them scalped everybody. So we're going to see the same lies. And this is something that learning this stuff just really frustrates me about humanity in general, how I don't give a crap. We're just fucking stupid. We get told something and then we believe it. And then we just pass the lies on and on and on. And we keep, and then another group of people get assimilated. Um, and starvation. And speaking of starvation, I almost forgot at the beginning. Everybody, look, regardless of your political views, we just wanted to put a call out to people. Food banks are in short supply on food. And again, no matter where your beliefs are on SNAP benefits, not everybody on there is rigging the system or trying to take advantage of the system. There are people who have jobs, especially federal workers right now who don't have income. People like me who are disabled through no fault of their own, um, who are not going to have anything to eat come the first. We're not, we don't want a bunch of arguments on politics. It's pretty simple. If you have food and means to donate to food banks or to reach out to people and get food to people who are, you know, experiencing food scarcity, just please consider it. And we can just leave it there. But hopefully you'll pass the word out to people you know, and we're only going to be able to get through stuff like this by helping each other. So please consider it.
Yeah, yeah. And then if you live in a neighborhood, you can maybe even set up some sort of free food pantry. And then there are tons of free resources going on right now. I've seen um, farmers markets where people are donating a bunch of food and handing it out there, and the resources are available to those who need it. Just might have to do a little bit of digging.
Exactly. And just for the record, I mean, if it was just a freeloader thing, we have a store here for those of you who aren't familiar with Texas. It's the store's HEB. This is a family-owned grocery store chain that most of us here in Texas are very familiar with. It's a $1 billion company, so it's not even something that's not like everybody else. It's a big grocery store chain throughout the entire state of Texas, and they just donated $600 million dollars. I'm sorry, 6 million. Apologies. Let me make sure I got the amount right. $6 million to food banks in the state. And a lot of organizations are also, um, I wouldn't, for me personally, I'm not donating to organizations because you never know where that money's going. It's better to just either take the food to the food bank, donate the money directly to the food bank, or actually get food into the hands of people, like Devin said, through neighborhood things, whatever. But just, just put the word out there. And I'm sorry I didn't start off the episode with that, but it ties into what we're talking about because that is how the Celtic people and probably most ancient cultures at one time before everything just got so subverted and commercialized, and they looked out for each other. But they had this one thing with these beings, and it wasn't, they considered it an alien race, and they were called the Mound, like Mound, because they had a mound. Um, but these beings were amoral, meaning they didn't have a concept of right or wrong. They didn't care, and they were so fearful of these. And this myth ends up becoming what is known as the fairies. And why do I say that? And why do a lot of people who study this say that? Because It didn't matter. Like it was just on a whim. They would, if you were in their favor, you got all kinds of not blessings, but things looked good for you and would work out for you. And if they didn't like you, or they didn't like something you did, man, like everything right now, somebody like people from the belief system would say, I did something by virtue of what I'm going through in my life to take off these beings, right? That's kind of the idea here. So the other thing that everybody really needs to keep in mind is for ancient people in general, the harvest, this isn't something that we you know, oh, we bob for apples, we do all this stuff. Ooh, harvest, and it's a fun time. And but for these people, if you don't have a good harvest, you're not getting through the winter. So this is about survival. It was really critical. And so they're doing everything they can because they associate whether or not they're going to have a good harvest as to whether or not they please these beings. And so the Druids were the priest of the society to ensure that these things were appeased, and also kind of to provide some order in a very loose form of that word within the society. They were kind of like they're the shaman in a way. And I'm using that term again, that's not exactly correct, but it kind of gives you the idea of the role they played. They were not doing human sacrifices. They were not doing they weren't even doing animal sacrifices. That is something that would make sense to them. They did take the weakest of their herd at that time and went ahead and slaughtered them for the meat, but also as an offering to these beings as well. So it served a dual purpose, one that was actually useful for the people to eat, but also to appease these beings. What happens over time is the whole pumpkin thing um, comes into play after the Catholic Church and the Romans get involved in this whole thing a long time later. And it's also been reported because here's where you have where the history of the Celts gets split. And as I was talking to Devin before this episode, we only always hear about the history from the victors. We only hear their version of the events. And that's where the Romans are basically saying these people have blood-soaked altars and they're doing human sacrifices and blah, blah, blah. And that is true to a degree. Some of the stuff was starting to appear among the Celts, but also the Celts didn't write stuff down. It was passed down verbal. And so early priests who converted to Catholicism wanted to know more about what they came from before their families were converted to Catholicism and they grew up in that. So they started doing research and would talk to living relatives who remembered what was passed on verbally to them. So their accounts are very different from what the Romans report, right? They didn't have all of that sacrifice going on until they meet two interesting groups of people. And I know people, and this is where, again, you have to dig, and the information's out there. But it was the Canaanites and the Egyptians and their contact with them that subverted the Celtic way of life. And so, yes, the Celts did eventually start doing human sacrifice because they came in contact, especially after they came in contact with the Canaanites. And this would be called, make your own minds up, this would be called alternative history. There's books out there by authors on the subject. The authors being the people that looked into from their relatives way back in the day and heard these tales. But basically, Moloch is referenced as being a god that was introduced to the Celts. And people could argue, well, how would they have had contact? Well, here's the thing. We also know that the Egyptians were here in the United States because we have ruins in Arizona that the government will not let people go to. So somehow, some way, people were communicating with each other in ways that we're just not aware of. And we're not told that history for a reason. But what everybody needs to be aware of is while the Celts, for the most part, lived pretty much like a lot of Native Americans, pretty peacefully among themselves, supported one another, their way of life got subverted long before the Romans came in, but even more so after. And so when the Romans come in, you have the church coming in, and you have this mergence of these two basically the Celts get assimilated into um, the Roman way and the church and all that kind of stuff. And then it even gets more macabre and darker because at that point, um, the Druids themselves kind of take on a very powerful role in encouraging people to do things like don't piss off the gods. And so the whole idea, what is meant by that is for trick or treating, where that initially comes from, is you wanted to appease these alien race people. And when the church comes in with their stuff, they're basically saying, look, um, you need to sacrifice something. And so they would knock on the door. And if you gave them what they wanted, which guess what it was? A child. They wanted a child to sacrifice. They would, the druids would then leave a pumpkin lit on the doorstep, meaning don't come to this house. We got what we wanted, and they'd move on. If you didn't give them what they wanted, they would put hexes and markings on your door, which sounds a lot like you guys remember in the Old Testament, we had to put blood on your door. Same shit, right? Just a different spin on it. So as time, we're going to move forward here. Then it even gets darker after that. They basically start from that moment on. Um, we move through the centuries, whatever. Then you get this, the Black Death hits Europe. And that just, I mean, everybody, didn't matter if you're wealthy, or monarch. I mean, it was affecting everybody. Bodies in the streets. So you get this thing called the dance macabre. Well, what is that? It's essentially this depiction of um, a bunch of, they would always show pictures of a bunch of skeletons dancing together, but it's this idea of you facing your own mortality. And then after the Black Death is no longer a threat, it even gets progresses from that into where the Catholic Church actually, because the church at this point is trying to, they're trying to tame Celts and Ireland. And we were very, I guess my ancestors were very feisty and didn't want to play ball. So so a lot of this whole, hey, we'll do All Hallows Eve. Well, but we'll call it All Saints Day. The Catholic Church never had that holiday. They never had any holiday like that. It was invented to appease the people. So then the church starts putting on these dances actually to celebrate the dance macabre. And essentially what is reported by people who attended them is, and you see this in the movie Hocus Pocus, where the parents won't stop dancing for any reason to the point of exhaustion. That's what would happen at these things. Some people even died. They would dance until they dropped dead. And they couldn't, the thing is it wasn't like they were willingly doing it. It was like they were being overcome with the entities or something, just partying down and dancing. And um, then the church is like, well, hey, we better, this isn't a good thing. And so they actually stopped doing that. But it went on for quite a long time. And that carries us up to we're kind of up to where we're getting close to modern times. And there's a lot of other little things in there as this progresses, but we don't have the time to cover in detail. There is, if you search on YouTube, um, the history of Halloween, you can find a lot of videos and they're going to cover the same stuff, some more in depth. There's some that are 3 hours long, which I've watched over the last week. Plus I've read this stuff on and on throughout the years, and then there's some videos as short as 24 hours. But I thought I'd ask Devin, do you have any questions or anything so far before we get up to more recent times?
Um, no, I have a couple notes on, I guess, the progression of it, with the Roman Empire and then the All Saints Day that I could maybe read. Um,
Sure.
sure, okay. So I know when the Roman Empire, when they came, when they took over and they combined their festivals with Samhain. And so the Roman Empire had two, and one was Feralia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it was to commemorate the passing of the dead, and it was celebrated in late October. Then they had Pomona, something like that. And it was that was the Roman goddess of fruit and trees, and it symbolized the apple. And then that later led into the bobbing of apples, one version of it. Um, but then before we get into the today's events, um, the May 13th was it became known as kind of the Christians' Day, All Saints' Day.
That's
Uh,
right. Thank you for mentioning that. I
yeah,
forgot to include that initially
May
with the Catholic Church. Yeah, it was in
Yeah, yeah,
May.
and it was for celebrating all the Christian martyrs. And then they moved it to November 1st to drain the life out of and replace the pagan Samhain, which at that time was named All Hallows Day. And so, uh, okay, wait, sorry. November 1st was named All Hallows Day, while October 31st was All Hallows Evening. Then it shifted into All Hallows Even, and
Yep,
then eventually it became Halloween. They took out
exactly.
yeah, so kind of cool. And then they added All Souls Day on November 2nd to honor
Right.
the departed. So kind of
Hmm.
like we'll get into how that looks in like different cultures around the world now. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and I'm going to let you take that because I know a little bit of, I mean, Day of the Dead for the Mexican culture comes out of that, but
yeah.
and it does filter into others, but I've more spent most of my time over the years on this because it intrigued me that basically something that started from my ancient in this lifetime, my ancient ancestors here is something that we're still, I mean, that's a long time. If
Yeah.
you go back to
Thousands of
pigs, I mean,
years.
it's thousands of years and it's
Yeah.
still, you know, I mean, it's still around. You could even argue that Christmas isn't even as old as that.
Yeah.
From our Saturn episode, it's not as old as, I mean, in a way it is when you look at how it, came through the religions, but but in terms of the harvest and all of yeah, there's still a lot of, even the bobbing for apples, which I'll mention it now because I'll forget, but it initially started, I mean, yes, the significance of the apple is important, but when the Celts got corrupted and their priests were, so if they had prisoners, they would boil water and tell prisoners, if you want your freedom, you can try to get that apple out,
Mm-mm.
or you're gonna be burned
With their
in the
hands?
wicker man. No, with their face. They had to
Oh,
bob
with
for the
their
apple with
face.
their face.
Oh, that's
And
terrible.
so either way, you're either gonna risk getting banged with boiling water, or you're gonna die burning in the wicker
Yeah.
with the wicker man. So yeah, so even that tradition, and think about this because I'll forget to add it, but I said it as a kid, trick or treat, smell my feet, give me something good to eat. If you don't, I don't care. I'll pull down your underwear.
Yeah.
What the hell? And then what? What the hell? What is that? That's what we'll find is that that's basically a veiled thread from these early traditions of giving from the soul cakes.
Oh, yeah, the soul
It's
cakes. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we're going to get into all of that
Yeah.
because the soul cakes lead to even so what from the whole making sure that you gave an offering when you got the knock on the door, whether a pumpkin was left or you were getting hexed on your doorstep. Soul
Yeah.
cakes is the next iteration of that
Yeah. Let's talk about
from the
soul
Catholic
cakes.
Church. So yeah, you want to start that off?
Yeah. So um let's see. So I guess it's kind of the beginning of trick-or-treating to what we know it today. And so back in the day, priests would tell Christians to pray for the souls that are in purgatory. And if they got enough prayers, then they could go to heaven. So it started off with poor people. Poor people would go, and I don't know if it was just one day out of the year they could go and do this, or if it was all throughout the year. Do you know? But they would go to people's,
No, I didn't see any specific. It sounded like they were making it sound like it was on that day,
yeah,
but it
yeah,
could have been over the course of days by virtue of,
okay.
depending on how long ago and
Man, but
travel
imagine you
time and
only
all
get
that.
they only get a couple days out of the year to go and actually like ask people and but anyways, the poor people would go and they could go up to people's doors and knock. And then the people would give them what's called a soul cake. And it was this spiced bread with raisins in it. And so they would give them the soul cake, and in exchange, that poor person would have to pray for the deceased. And then eventually it became children going up to the doors, and in return they would get a soul cake, and they would have to go and pray for the deceased, um, for all the souls in purgatory. Um, yeah, and then eventually, of course, it became trick-or-treating, going to people's doors and asking for candy.
Well, and think about that for a minute. Like once again, and I was told this stuff. I was raised Catholic, and you believe this shit. I mean, it honestly, you're going to give me, okay, first of all, people are going to, they already had to live this shitty life. Even if they had a good life, you're going to go pay for something you did,
Mhm.
in purgatory just to try to get to heaven, to go be with a jealous God who's always telling you, I am God, I am God. Okay, dude, we get it. And then you're going to have people pray for them. And then in return, you're going to get a fucking piece of cake. Nobody at that time thought, I don't know, this sounds stupid. No, they didn't, because obviously generations, I mean, there are still Catholics today who
Yeah.
are still, I mean, even after they learned about, even in modern times, what they were covering up, going all the way back to, and I'm sure that they're still covering up for today. Or how about this? How about during the Middle Ages, the indulgences, where if you're wealthy and maybe you are doing some really nasty stuff, you can go to confession and tell the priest, hey, I'll just write you a check. And nobody has a problem with this institution. People wrote checks to get out of, quote, their sin, or to get into heaven. You could buy your way into heaven. Led Zeppelin, anybody? They're buying the stairway to heaven. I mean, that's what they were doing, and nobody questioned it. And the church has a lot. I think the church, I mean, they have a lot to answer for, but especially with this particular holiday, they, you could argue that yes, it started with the Celts, but I think once we get to this point, they're really the proliferation of where we're at today with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Definitely.
and I guess since we are talking about them assimilating into Ireland, I guess we need to talk about, before I forget, Stingy Jack.
Oh yeah.
Stingy as in greedy, or Stingy, Stingy Jack. So my grandfather told me about Stingy Jack when I was little. He was every time there was St. Patrick's Day parade, we were there. He was I'm Irish. I'm proud to be Irish. Um, Four-leaf clovers, leprechauns, the whole bit. That was my grandfather on my mom's side. And so the story of Stingy Jack is he um, is at a bar drinking, and he comes across the devil. And the devil's like, hey, I'm here to take you. And so Stingy Jack is like, well, I've got to pay for my drink. And so the devil gives him a coin. And because it was a possession of the devil, Stingy Jack puts the coin in his pocket. And there's a cross in his pocket. And so by virtue of that being a possession of the devil's with the cross, he ends up basically entrapping the devil. Because Stingy Jack is also manipulative. And so he basically tells the devil can't take him, because he's like got power over the devil by virtue of this. Basically, it's like a talisman of the devil, essentially. And since it's like with the cross, now Stingy Jack has power over the devil. And he basically tells the devil, look, you can't take me right now. Basically, and I'm paraphrasing all this, but basically, you can't take me right now. And makes an agreement with the devil to say, you go your way, I go mine. So Stingy Jack goes about his life, and then crosses paths with the devil again. And this time the devil's in a tree, as on this path that Jack is walking. And the devil's like, it's time for me to take you now. And Stingy Jack is like, okay, okay. Well, Jack cuts a piece of bark off the tree. And once again, I guess he knew that the devil was on his ass all the time, because he has a cross in his pocket again, and he puts it into the tree where the bark was and slices it into place, and basically says, I've trapped you here. Like, as far as what I'm concerned, you can't come and get me from out of that tree to take me to hell. And you can never take me to hell. And you can't damn me. And that's the arrangement. Because once he makes an arrangement with the devil, he gave the devil back his coin the first time. Once he makes this agreement with the devil the second time, saying you can never take me to hell, he takes the cross back. The devil goes on his way because it's a pact, right? You've made a pact with the devil. So devil goes back to hell. Well, eventually Stingy Jack does die. And when he dies, heaven doesn't want him. And he goes back to hell and he's trying to get into hell. And the devil doesn't want him because he's fooled him twice. And so he has to wander the earth. And then he can't see his way through the ethereal form that he's in, through the darkness of the world that he's in. So he goes and he bitches to the devil, basically, I can't see. So the devil gives an ember from hell into a pumpkin, and that pumpkin is his lantern. So, so aside from what we have with the Celts, this is a myth that kind of comes from the emergence of, it was a thing that Catholic nuns and priests would tell people about, to teach people in Ireland about making, don't make pacts with the devil. Don't be stingy. Don't be this. Don't be manipulative like Jack. But it was basically a bastardization of the truth, but it becomes a prominent theme in Ireland instead of the real story behind it about being, the Druids coming and asking for offerings to begin with. And so that's how but regardless of which thing you adhere to, when you light a pumpkin in your house, understand what you're paying homage to. That you're basically, by lighting that, either you're trying to light your way through the darkness, do some pact with the devil, or offerings. So when you put that out, are you saying you're willing to offer your child or yourself or your household? What are you giving? What is that opening up to? Because that was the precedence that it was intended upon. And so now you know. It's creepy. Welcome to
Mhm.
Halloween and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you ever heard that story?
I've never heard that. That was my first time hearing that. But it makes sense, especially with the lighting of the candles and how that's always been sort of this initiation or calling to something higher, you know, outside of you usually or
Well,
um
and unfortunately, my grandfather told it to me like, hey, it's a funny story. I wish honestly, I would have preferred to have been told like, you know, what was behind it and then the story. And then the lesson there is, do you really want to participate in this holiday? Do you really want to carve a pumpkin? Knowing,
yeah,
even as a child, I was a weird kid anyway, but yeah, I probably would have, especially when I got a little bit older as a teenager, would have been like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I thought it was messy anyway and disgusting to begin with.
it is
Even as a little kid, I didn't like it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, Devin, that's where we get the whole Jack-o'-lantern. Jack of the Lantern is from Stingy Jack roaming the world with his ember of hell in his pumpkin, illuminating his darkened future.
Wow.
And he's forever going to. And some people theorize that vampirism kind of has some ties to that old when it starts coming into Europe from Eastern Europe into Western Europe, because that was Stingy Jack is an Irish Western Europe kind of idea. So those two kind of things merge, and and I do think there's probably like vampire. Well, we see even people, there are vampiric people here that suck people's energy
Yeah.
intentionally, right? And so we know, I'm sure there's vampiric entities. That's probably where that whole uh, those entities probably influenced the whole Bram Stoker's Dracula and the creation of all that, and that's another thing, that's the proliferation of that story to this day. Like, and how many vampire movies, that theme never dies out.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point that we have glittering vampires in the Twilight series, right? That can be out in the sunlight,
Yeah. Uh, so many
and we
questions.
go watch it. We go watch people
Yeah.
biting human necks, and I was into all that stuff. I'm not putting anybody down. The
Yeah.
whole goth subculture is all about vampires and death
Hmm.
and creatures of the night and anything that's weird and macabre.
Hmm.
Well, now I look back at that and go, what were you thinking? You weren't. That's the problem. You didn't question it. you didn't ask yourself where that stuff comes from, and so there we are.
Yeah. I think though, I think having experienced that, you later can question it and just have a full, better understanding of it and everything else. So
And
I'm
I
definitely one
agree.
of those.
You just hope you wake up though, right? Because if you
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah. Yeah. So going off of the kind of origins of the jack-o'-lantern, I wanted to talk about a couple of the other kind of origins. One of them being the black cat being seen as something unlucky. And so that one apparently was apparently back in the day, they used to say that witches, when they were about to be convicted, they would shapeshift into a cat or a black cat and they would
mhm.
escape. So that's one of those. And then another one was going under a ladder. That one originated in Egypt, apparently. And back then, it was really unlucky if you went under a ladder and then you got squashed or killed. And it kind of just became uh, my brain is blanking on that. Hex, what is it? An unlucky,
Yeah, hex.
yeah,
Yeah, same
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
that thing. Yeah. And then another origin was the um, another origin. So back in the day, the maidens who weren't married yet, apparently, if they would write on mirrors, do mirror scrying and some sort of weaving with apples, maybe it was the apple on a string or something like that, they would be able to tell their future husbands. So that's kind of more just an origin of apples and that. Uh, I wanted to kind of get into more about um, different places around the world and how they celebrate bits and pieces of Halloween.
That sounds great because
Yeah.
that's where my I didn't get into that as much. I
Yeah.
know a little bit about Day of the Dead and the
Mhm.
Mexican subculture,
Yeah.
but that's pretty much where my knowledge on that ends.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, in, today's times, Ireland, Canada, and USA, we kind of all celebrate traditional Halloween where we have the dressing up, the trick-or-treating, the parties, all of that, the candy, celebrating it in that way. However, in Mexico and Latin America, they celebrate Dia de los Muertos. And it's this 3-day festival celebration where they're honoring the lives of their deceased relatives. And it's seen as this day where their relatives can actually cross over and come visit them again. And I love the idea of Dia de los Muertos. I love it. It's so family centered, but in reality, um, those people, those ghosts, those entities, they are not your family. But
It's
this was,
interesting too that they leave out food, which is much like the
yeah,
Celts did.
yeah, they'll leave out food.
Offerings,
Like
yeah.
they'll leave out offerings, their favorite food too. They'll bake
Hmm.
that certain bread. They'll clean their grave sites. They can, get tequila. Sometimes they even get mariachi bands, is what I was reading, which I think
Yeah.
is so fun because it's, celebrating their passing and celebrating them um, having lived their lives. And I love the sound of it. It sounds so nice. Um, yeah. And so Dia de los Muertos, it was after Spain's conquest, the church tied Aztec death rituals to All Saints' Day, until the Chicanos reclaimed the roots of Dia de los Muertos. So,
Yep. More assimilation. Thank you,
yeah,
Catholic Church.
yeah, yeah. In England, they celebrate Guy Fawkes Day, and it's on November 5th. This one isn't really like Halloween related, but they did fireworks and bonfires, and it was designed to commemorate the execution of this notorious English traitor. And he tried to blow up the English Parliament building and to assassinate King James the First. So
May I recommend to people that even though it's not the actual Guy Fawkes, but
yeah,
if you guys like the Matrix movies and you like the Wachowski brothers, check out the movie V for Vendetta because that character wears a Guy Fawkes mask, and we see the Guy Fawkes mask even present day and like Anonymous and stuff like that. But it's a great movie because yeah, Parliament does get blown up in it. It's kind of cool.
yeah,
I mean, the movie. But I'll just leave it at the movie's kind of cool, but
yeah,
that scene in it, we'll just leave it at that.
yeah, yeah,
So, but I just thought I'd point people to that movie.
yeah. Oh, but in England, they celebrate bonfires. Back then, they would call it bonfires, where they would set up these bonfires to burn effigies. And then children would carry these effigies or guy, and they would go around asking a penny for a guy, and they would get, a penny. And I think for the most part, this holiday has died down. It's not celebrated as much. Um, yeah. And
Well,
then,
and it's interesting. It's that's interesting about the um some of the similarities though with even getting something like a penny for a guy,
yeah,
right? There's an exchange in
yeah,
all of these things, no
hmm,
matter where the focus is.
yeah, yeah.
Did you have another one that you were going to mention, or
Oh,
because I
I
feel like
sure
I
do.
interrupted you?
Yeah, I got a couple more. Uh, so in Italy, theirs has more deeply religious undertones that kind of go back to, Catholics and Christianity. And they celebrate All Saints on November 1st. And so in Sicily, um, they celebrate, they see the deceased having this one's a little bit weird. The deceased having come back and they'll bring gifts to the good children. Kind of.
Hmm.
It kind of ties to just a bunch of different things. In Sardinia, children go door to door and they ask for offerings for the deceased. Romans, they eat a meal near the grave sites of their loved ones. And Abruzzo and Trentino regions, they do the lanterns, the candles, and the pumpkins. Um, in Guatemala, they celebrate the deceased by giant kites in the sky. China, they actually celebrate a festival beginning in April called Qingming, and it's called the Tomb Sweeping Day, which they go and they sweep out their loved ones' tombs. And then in Japan, it's a newer holiday for Japan. They don't actually celebrate anything to do with Halloween. They just see it as a holiday to party. And Japan is
It's
really
like
funny. They,
cosplay, right? I
yeah,
did
to
cover that. I
cosplay.
did see that.
Yeah, to cosplay or a thing that they're doing is they dress up as something really, really ordinary. So people will dress up as, policemen, mailmen. I've seen people like, oh, the guy on the subway forgets to get off at his stop. And then another one was, oh, couples at an amusement park fighting. They like to celebrate the ordinary, and they just go to like raves and clubs and really like party it up apparently in Japan. But yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. Well, and apparently the cosplay that's going on in Japan, I did see that in a video. They covered that where it's like they took the dressing up components and the fun aspects without necessarily the horror. I mean, some horror as well, but they just want to do it to dress up. They don't trick or treat. They don't do any of that.
Yeah.
They just pretty much use it as a day to dress up. And when you were talking about the All Saints Day and their procedures with the deceased relatives come. I mean, I remember all that from having grown up in it. But you know, uh, I've had a lot of people like, how did you like when I was even as an adult? They're like, why did you get into the God subculture? And I'm like, because I was raised Catholic. And everybody looks at me like, what do you mean? And I'm like, we would. So in relation to that whole like we would there was two elderly women whose house they were just nice ladies that went to church and we would go to their houses and it would be like all their blinds would be drawn and they're old Italian Catholic women and they had the most horrendous pictures. I mean, I don't know if people realize like we have crucifixes. So you've got somebody splayed out on a cross, with nails in there. But these were like the ones with the blood from the wounds. There was another one of Jesus with like a this one woman's house. I swear to God, she had all of the little red votive candles burning in her house, and it was all dark. And this picture of Christ with like the heart with the thorns on it, and it's all bleeding.
Mhm.
And he had his hand on it like he was pulling it out. He was holding it to like give. I don't know. It's just and like you're a child going in. To me, that is the epitome of a haunted house.
Mm.
It's creepy, and it felt heavy. It felt ominous going in there. The ladies were perfectly nice ladies, but it was all death and it's like, really? You wonder why I'm goth? That was imprinted on me from and then going to a church with those nasty. There's a dead man. You know, I think I was 6 or 7, and in the 70s they were doing the services in Latin. You don't know what they're saying. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you know. But you would, I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I literally wanted to know, when are we going to let that guy down? Because he's been up there for a long time. As a little kid's brain, that's what went through my head. You know, I got whacked with a ruler on the back of my hand, both hands,
Mm.
10 times for asking that question. You know, it's kind of like that's where like these religions perpetuating these holidays, and you look beyond the veil of what. I mean, we still have millions of Catholics today. We still have millions of Christians today, and nobody questions it. Even if they're not even practicing, even if they don't even go except on the holidays, that you still can't. I mean, if anybody Catholic watches this, they would give me crap about it. Or Christian, they'll give me crap about it because I'm saying you don't see what I see. I was part of both religions for years, and I woke up one day and said, "There's something wrong here." And I guess I'm being too idealistic to think that it is a hard thing to do, but you got to, if you don't look at it, then nothing's going to change for anybody, you know? And I guess, maybe I shouldn't care about that, but that's why we're doing this podcast because we do care. Like I do want people to wake up. If for anything, just to start treating each other better and quit following protocols. Just because, just like you need pause. And so on that, people perpetuating things when you get up to, I think we've kind of delved enough into the history, but when we get to like the 20th century, this is where trick or treating takes a turn. Like we talked about the sold cakes and that becoming more of a child's thing. So, and especially in America, this is where this really kicks off. You had youth basically it becomes known as Devil's Night, which, by the way, you'll hear that term in the movie The Crow. They got away from using the term Halloween because they didn't want it associated, the youth didn't want it associated with anything religious because they were doing things like, you need to pause again. So have you heard any of the stories about the youth and all of the shenanigans they were pulling on Devil's Night? It was bad, like to the point that mayors and even people in government were getting concerned because
It was more than ding
first
dong ditching.
what's that?
It was more than ding dong ditching.
Oh man, people were being killed and hurt, like either in car accidents because they were leaving gates open.
Yeah.
People like who ranched or farmed, like they were losing livestock.
Wait, like in
They
the
would
1900s or
like the 20th century, yeah,
okay,
the
yeah.
early like, and it was getting more and more out of hand and more ridiculous. Um, and even in Britain, there was this thing where they would go in to the cabbage patch and grab and just pelt. It wasn't like, oh, minor. They were breaking windows. They had dismantled tractors and put them back together on top of like ranchers' houses overnight here in the States. It was like out of control. So they were trying to figure out, hey, like how are we going to get a handle on this? And so that's when they start getting these little Halloween festivals going and encouraging people. Oh, no worries.
And I want to apologize for the video being super choppy this last minute or two. I have my daughter coming out and talking, and then my cats fighting, and my granddad coming out to say goodnight. So sorry. Sorry.
Well, and essentially we're at the point where it's kind of a good way to kind of show the chaos that was going on in the night. I mean, we're talking about the chaos that they
Yeah.
experienced with the youth of America.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fitting, right? But essentially they kind of start putting together programs to get the youth involved. And then this is where we start getting the trick or treating was much different. It was basically baking apple, like homemade cookies, apples, your Rice Krispie, whatever, stuff like that. That starts getting passed out. The youth start going to parties. And then we get into where we're getting this kind of and also even farmers and in places like rural areas kind of start doing these basically, for lack of a better term, harvest festivals. So we're kind of going back to what they were initially for, with this added component of it being more catered to youth. And then when we get into the 1950s, you have a company called Ben Cooper. And any of us in the 70s actually remember these costumes. They're the plastic costume that you like over your clothing, and then the mask with the string on the back. This company starts raking in money, candy sales start shooting up, because in the 70s, even maybe the latter 60s, but I think it was more in the 70s is where we start running into the problem of you're not taking home baked goods, because we started running into the sadistic turning events where people were putting bad stuff. One case in particular in the night, I think it was in the 80s, early 80s maybe, a father put arsenic into his son's pixie stick so he could blame it on that it was tainted candy that he got from trick or treating so he could get insurance, life insurance
Yeah.
from him. But
Yeah.
you also had other people, just strangers doing this, right? That's why the whole bring your candy in to get x-rayed.
I
But what
heard that.
essentially,
I
oh,
heard
go ahead.
that it wasn't even really that many outside people having done it. It was mostly
That's true.
parents, or
Hmm.
like they were somehow tied to, their child biting into a razor apple or something.
Yeah,
But
really
rarely
disgusting
ever like
stuff.
an outsider. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. It was rarely. Um, but that's where that scare comes into play.
Yeah.
And then so you already have this $1 billion or this actually at this point, multi-million-dollar industry for making costumes. Now you get the candy component. And so the figure you had was $11 billion in candy,
Yeah. Yeah.
Devin. Okay. So, um, and interesting enough, let's talk about the trick or treat. Here's your trick. The treat's the candy, right? Well, in that candy that you're eating, if these people are making mad money off of it, and doing my research for this and candy, I'm diabetic, so I can't eat that crap anymore. Um, and it is crap. I mean, first the fact of sugar, I keep trying to impress this upon people because I'm highly addicted to it, like highly addicted to it. It is a drug. And what do I mean by that? It's addictive. It lights up the same areas of the brain that heroin does. Anybody can look this up. They've done research on it. And by the way, most people who come off the drugs, the first thing they go to as they're detoxing is they will buy bags and bags of what? Candy. And they eat it like they can't get enough of it because it's hitting those same areas of the brain that cocaine and
Yeah.
heroin does. So aside from that component, when you take your kid trick or treating, all of the US chocolate, this is something else that I told Devin before the podcast, is laced and leaded. I mean, I'm using the term leaded. There are small trace amounts that exceed what the FDA says is safe of lead, but also the aluminum rates, metals, there's heavy metals in all of the US chocolate. And you can think that if you buy, we were kind of prone to like Lindt and Cadbury because we thought they're imported. They're not. They get licensing from the manufacturer, like the Swiss company Lindt or Cadbury. Well, actually, in America, I think Hershey actually now owns Cadbury. But even prior to that, any licensing, for example, Perrier, do you honestly think they're shipping Perrier from France? No, it's made here. So the same thing with chocolate, they get licensing to manufacture it here. And so where's this metal coming from, US? It's coming from the assembly line. and into the chocolate. So every piece of chocolate you're eating heavy metal. And this is something that you can look up. Even AI won't lie to you about that. It's been tested, it's proven, it's a known fact. So you're giving your kids and yourselves sugar and lead. There's your trick. So you think you're getting a treat, there's your trick or treating. Um, and also too, I think it's fair to say that if you looking into all this history that we've delved into and talked about, there's an exchange being done here, in any respect. The trick of this, I think, is the trick of us following along with things that we choose to be ignorant about. We don't choose to do our homework on it. We don't choose to look into stuff, and I've done it. I'm not trying to point fingers. I spent my life, I trick or treated as a kid. I've went to Halloween parties as an adult. Matter of fact, Halloween, we weren't as big of fans of Christmas anyway. Um, but we were big time proponents. We even bought skulls, and I had a shirt that looked like I had escaped from a psych ward that said psycho on it. Um, bought the Halloween. I think that's the other thing. Does anybody think about what wearing a scream mask or Michael Myers? Michael Myers stabs people. Just think about that for a minute. The movie is about a guy that's trying to kill his sister and kills a bunch of other teens in the process, and you're wearing a mask to celebrate that or pay homage to that, or my favorite, how about the Freddy Krueger or the Jason mask? What as people, what the hell are we doing?
For
Why are
me,
we paying
oh,
to be scared? Oh, go ahead.
no, yeah, no. And for me, it's what message are we telling our subconscious or unconscious mind when we're watching those scary movies or like all of the blood and gore in them? What are we telling our like unconscious mind? And then what are we opening our minds up to as well when we're watching all those horror movies? Like I feel like entities when we're in those emotions or they can just easily kind of like attach or attack when we're watching those horror movies as well.
Well, and think about, I know, look, I know this is a Christian phrase, but I think there's something to it energetically. So have you heard the term where one or two, or wait, where one or two or more are gathered? There's power in that. So think about that. We're powerful, right? And we can,
Yeah.
I just heard a podcast with Tony talking about how we can actually create our own positive entities. Okay, that's pretty powerful stuff. So you get a bunch of people who aren't aware of their power watching something with all of that attention. And they say that most of us sometimes when you're in the states of shock and awe and fear, your mind, even though you're watching a movie, doesn't determine from reality. It's not distinguishing this isn't real. That's why you have the reactions that you have. For example, are you familiar with the movie? I've never watched it. I don't want to watch it. But it's a franchise. It's called Terrifier, and it's a
Oh,
creepy, disgusting
I've seen the
clown.
first one. Yeah. Yeah.
You saw it.
Uh, a long time ago. Yeah.
I've heard, from what I've heard, that there are people that have literally thrown up in the theater when they
Oh,
watched
really?
it.
Yeah, I
And
can't remember it that well, but I remember the freaky clown is kind of like yeah.
I've heard the depiction of the balance is, from what I've heard, like it's extreme torture and it's like basically what was used as torture porn was the description of the person
Eek.
covering it.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah.
and then actually, I probably like well, both my parents are gone, but my parents actually, um, the movie had been out, so they have no excuse for this except for the fact that they were young and stupid. But my parents actually they wanted to go with friends to go see The Exorcist.
Ooh.
I think it was like in 1976 or 1970. Anyway, I'm five, somewhere between, I probably think I was six, maybe seven. Um, my memory on this because it was terrifying, but they had two boys the same age as my brother and I. But our parents took us to see that because they couldn't find a babysitter and they thought it was going to be boring. they took us to see that movie at those ages.
Yeah.
And you talk about trauma for you, and again, trauma.
Yeah.
So these entities are just feeding off of that. Um, as long and these franchises are like, I mean, how many Halloweens are there? How many times do you have to kill Jason
Yeah.
or Freddy Krueger or whomever? They keep. I mean, I think there was just a recent Halloween, like what, two or three, like in 2023
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
2024, right? With Jamie Lee Curtis
Hmm. And there
still
have
in
been
it.
like
I'm like,
multiple newer ones that came out of that same, like with Jamie Lee Curtis and the new Halloween.
yeah. And then you'll see people walking down the street wearing the mask um, or the other side of it too that we haven't addressed is the ridiculous like sexy nurse, sexy. You really, I mean, nuns aren't sexy. They smack you with rulers, man. What is that? Like, I'm not saying you have to pay reverence to that religion, but why do you have to take something and turn everything? I mean, it's either terror or sex or terror, terror or sex, drama, sex, drama, terror.
Yeah.
Are we not tired of this stuff?
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I told you, like, I told Devin I had quit vaping this past week, and Michelle had told me today before she's like, you've been salty and cantankerous all day. She's like, maybe you should have a little nicotine before you, because this topic just it angers me a lot just because of my own patterns that I've seen I've fallen into, and then at society, what we're getting into all the time. Do you need to pause? I
No.
saw Kitty. That's how you. I thought you threw something at one of your cats.
I, I
Not to like
tend
hurt,
to,
but just to get their attention.
yeah, I have a feisty cat and a kitten, but yeah.
But I think this just goes to show that something, this particular holiday, this even precedes even what we discussed in Saturn in terms of traditional, even that dates back thousands of years, but this Halloween celebration, or the harvest, or Samhain, let's just call it what it is, it originated as Samhain. This is thousands, even beyond the 2,000-year-old window that we're talking about. And it is talk about being in a prison and repeating, even from an ancestral point of view.
Yeah.
Every year that I celebrated Halloween, I'm actually participating in some ancestors I don't even know were, and I wasn't even aware of what I was doing. And so here we are, as above, so below, just cycle after cycle, getting into stuff and not even, we're living unaware and not awake. And I don't mean woke like in that sense. I mean literally like knowing what the hell you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think most of us, I mean, what about this? Oh, I'm glad I remembered this because I wanted to bring it up. The zombie thing. I think that's why the zombie thing is that theme, because I think that theme is so important because it's trying to tell us not the flesh eating and all of that, but that we're all living like zombies. We're not awake. We forgot.
Yeah, I think the zombies are definitely supposed to be us. Hive mind, uh, just asleep. Yeah.
And consuming, I mean, they in
Consuming.
those they
Yeah.
consume flesh, but what are we doing? We
Mhm.
just consume and we get up and we don't. That's the other thing. And I'm going out on a limb here by saying this, but does anybody even question why they go to work at
Yeah.
the particular type of job, and or why we're put, like we were talking about, the things that our money's going to? I'd rather feed people in my community
Then
than
fun
spend
for.
money on wars or
Yeah.
what's going on behind the scenes with what we know they're doing or with corruption. And and so if we can't even wake up about a holiday and kind of like, do you want to put money in the pockets of Mars, Twix, the costume companies, the movie industry, which we know that they're involved in a lot of stuff? Um, or do we want to wake up and actually, there's so many other things we could do at this time of year. We could turn everything on its head and be like, hey, you know what, this year we're not going to buy candy. We'll buy food for other people. How about that? And I know these things sound very idealistic, but I think we are innately compassionate, caring people, and we don't have to identify with an ism or a political group or anything else to be who we truly are, and kind of bring that into the world instead of just going along with. oh yeah, let me put this, let me put this mask on, or go to this Halloween party, or engage in these. Because, like you said, we don't know what we're opening ourselves up to, and these are things that have been established. Maybe that's why this stuff has been so long standing, is because it applies um, to being something's being fed for a long time, and
Yeah.
that's why they keep perpetuating, right?
Hmm.
And since we're not questioning it, it's well fed, or they're well fed, and
Yeah.
but that's so I'm sorry, like this wasn't like a fun, hey, this is what Halloween's about. This is kind of more to hopefully get people to think about what they're doing, and even, make up their own minds about whether they want to participate in it or not. I mean, we got rid of all of our Halloween decorations. Even what was after the Saturn episode that we did, and with Christmas, and then I had watched some stuff about Halloween, and then just kept, throughout this time until we did this episode, kept looking into it.
Yeah.
And Michelle and I were like, no, let's just get rid of our stuff. Why do we need skulls? And then you talked about spider entities. Yeah, we don't need spiders in the house either. Like, why do, I mean, we don't want them in here when they're alive, let alone fake ones. Why do we have this stuff? So we don't have any of our decorations anymore. We got rid of it. And our Christmas ones too. We
Yeah.
have nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So So
Mm.
that's all the information I have. I don't know if you wanted to add any more to,
Yeah.
uh,
Um, yeah, I know like tomorrow's Halloween and my daughter and I are gonna go out trick-or-treating. And to each their own. I feel like gnosis and understanding of everything uh can give you a really good just grounding in everything. But I'm going to throw up some protection for us and just using my own energy and uh I don't know, maybe if y'all want to do that too, y'all can do that. But just stay safe out there and enjoy whatever whatever things you get into and just enjoy whatever experiences you can safely. But
did you guys carve a pumpkin this year
we
and
didn't
put a hell
we were
ember in
gonna
it?
no no we were gonna we're gonna paint one later, I think. But
See,
uh
that's way more fun in my view.
yeah.
That's more fun, and you can be
Yeah,
more creative
carving
with
is
it. It's
it's
less messy.
difficult to carve and yeah, less messy and I think it'll be easier. Harper's only 5, so safer too. But yeah, we're gonna do
Yeah,
that.
for
Go
sure.
to a corn maze next week and um yeah, her
See, stuff like that's fun. Like, I think um, I don't even know if that was a thing. Uh, that might have been a 20th century thing after an American, uh, with the youth or whatever that may, but I don't think that has, I don't know, I'd have to do research on that, but I don't think the corn maze thing, or necessarily, I think that there's fun things you can do,
yeah,
that don't actually have to get into all the other stuff. And then once you're aware of it, like you said, you can, um, kind of set intentions. But I mean, for us with the decorations, they're macabre. I mean, it's because the whole premise of Halloween is to be spooky, which that kind of comes to play in the 20th century here in the US as well. But yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, I don't, um, we had a witch that, um, and I even told Michelle, I go, I don't know why we bought that thing. I mean, even people were like, that thing, I don't know, it was scary. It
yeah,
was scary, and it didn't make any sound or anything, just the look of it. Because sometimes you would second, like, if you saw it out of the corner of your eye, it seemed like it had moved.
yeah,
And it's like, you know what? Why did we keep this thing? It's so creepy. I don't even know why we bought it. What
yeah,
was, we had brain damage, obviously, when we bought this thing.
yeah.
But yeah, I think you guys can, I think your plan is a good one, and
Yeah,
a lot better than,
yeah. I had one more thing I wanted to point out about Halloween. Like the Christians came and they kind of ruined all of pagan holidays or a bunch of just original traditions. And I feel like Halloween was there's this clear divider that it they couldn't completely erase Halloween from the actual holiday. And I thought that was cool because, I mean, you look at every other holiday, like St. Patrick's Day, driving out the snakes, like every other holiday, and it's kind of based somewhat in, different roots and then upheaved by the Christians. But yeah, I'm glad that some of the roots got to remain with this holiday, even though it's dark and scary and mischievous and all about ghosts and entities and darker things. Um,
Yeah, I think for me, the history part of it was like when I learned it's such like how you guys were also like the early ancestors with Samhain, like you guys were part of the trap too.
yeah,
Because I mean, you guys were hiding out from an alien species and trying to appease them.
the alien
I
species part is, I want to read more about that.
Yeah, they called. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. They called the Ichi or she, but it's spelled Shie because it's Gaelic. But that's what they were called, and they were, like I said, they were the amoral, like quote, alien beings that they were appeasing. I was just so disappointed in that because I was like, you guys were doing everything else until you got co-opted by the Egyptians and the Canaanites. You guys, from what written accounts we have, were kind of this really egalitarian um, society, except for that one belief where you guys were hung up on. Uh, and like I said, they weren't doing like human sacrifices. It was like either stuff from their harvest or those kind of things that they would give to appease these things. But it's like you guys weren't even living in your power. How disappointing,
Yeah.
So, but that's the depressing. It's not what It's not what you think it is. Um, But then aren't you finding, or I am by now, and I've only been, like I said, into this for a couple months. Nothing ever is as it seems. It never
Mm-mm.
is.
Mm-mm.
It's always deceit and smoke and mirrors, or magnets and mirrors. That's what this
Yeah.
place thrives on. So,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
So happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think for what this is, I mean, we could have, of course, covered more. There is a lot more details about the Celts and even different, time issues during the time period. But again, there's plenty of information out there. Um, I mean, just on YouTube alone, let alone there's books on the subject. It's very fascinating stuff if you want to do a deeper dive on it. But I think for now, we've given everybody the basis of where it came from and where we are today.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I agree. Definitely. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, don't pedal loose this holiday season. Go out and try to feed some people if you can.
Yeah. All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye bye. Happy Halloween.